welcome to the brand new show from the Nebraska Writers Guild Author Chat. I have here on the show with me, Shoshana Sumrall Frerking, and I'm so excited to introduce her tonight. Let me read her bio. And I'm getting a little bit of feedback from you, Shoshana. Is your microphone on your thing here? On your earbud? No, I don't know why I'm getting feedback. It was working fine just a minute ago.
Are you still getting it?
It's much better now. So I don't know what that was.
Well, I had one earbud in my lap. Maybe that was making a difference. I don't know why that would. But
sometimes there's a microphone on your cord, and if it's rubbing against something, that could be doing it. But
no, this one doesn't have a mic, so I don't know what that was.
Weird.
Okay.
The fun with live shows, right? Well, Shoshana is the author of dark urban fantasy, and her novel is Weatherbone, as well as she's the author of several short stories, including her latest, The Thing with Chickens, which is in the Breaking Bizarro anthology from Death's Head Press. She's also a technical writer living in rural Nebraska with her husband and 5 cats. And for more of her short stories and nightmares, you can visit her website. And right before the show, I linked to her website below. So in the comments, you can find her website. It's just her name, Shoshana Sumrall Frerking.com, and you can find that in there. All right, so we're going to just jump right into our author interview with Shoshana. So tell us about yourself, Shoshana. Where'd you grow up and what got you into writing?
Well, I grew up on a farm in western Nebraska, just outside of Curtis, which is about halfway between McCook and North Platte. I was an only child, and my mom is a creative writer, and so is my aunt. And so I started writing stories from a very early age. I was not even probably 2 years old when I started writing stories. So of course they were cartoon stories then. But soon they had talk bubbles over them, and pretty soon they were just illustrated stories, and then they were just stories. And my mom always encouraged this. We collaborated on lots of stories together. We wrote a few books together when I was a little kid. Bedtime stories with monsters and things like that, and superheroes, and so that was kind of how I got started. And being an only child growing up on a farm in western Nebraska, you've got lots of time to grow your imagination, and so that was pretty much what I did.
Definitely. Super fun. And how long have you been writing?
Let's see, creative writing, I would say 40 plus years.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, I wrote my first story when I was probably less than 2 years old, and I'm 51, so it's been a long time.
And you just published a book in the fall, right?
Yeah, Weatherbone.
Weatherbone. And how long did it take you to write that one?
Well, I came up with the idea many years ago and wrote a few early versions of the story, but I would say when I really got serious about this novel and wrote from beginning to end and discarded all of the parts I didn't like, that probably took me about 3 years.
Yeah.
I'm hoping it won't take so long to write the sequel, but we'll see.
Well, my first one took 4, so yeah, but my second one only took like a year, so it was like that. So cool.
Yeah, I'm hoping I've had some practice now, so I can get a little faster at it.
Exactly. So what gave you the idea to write your book? Tell us about it.
Well, there were several different things that influenced the writing of this book. I would say the first thing that influenced it was I used to work at a firm that built scientific instruments. Well, I still do, but it's a different firm. And sitting in all these meetings with all of these engineers and scientists, taking notes and all of that stuff, it always stimulated my mind, and I would start imagining, what if these instruments that we're building could do things like transmit signals from other dimensions or manifest monsters or demons or something like that. And it just, I couldn't help myself. I would be sitting there taking notes, but also writing story ideas. And I also, ever since I was a little kid growing up on the farm, I loved monsters, especially dragons and thunderstorms. And so I just took all of those things that I loved and put them all together and found a way to turn it all into a story.
Oh, wonderful. That's fantastic. So, let's see, what's your writing process like?
Well, I've kind of settled into a pattern where, since I do work full time as a technical writer still, when I go to break at noon, I take my laptop and I write as much as I can on my story. And I do that 5 days a week. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, I go up to my office and work on the manuscript for maybe 3 or 4 hours. And I edit the things I've already written. And then I try to write a bunch of new stuff too. So that's pretty much my process.
That's cool. So tell us about your publishing journey. What made you want to publish your book?
Well, in the beginning, the first draft of the book, I didn't know very much about publishing. I didn't know very much about honing my craft. And I thought naively that I had pretty much reached my pinnacle and I was never going to get any better. So I might as well try and get an agent. So I sent this manuscript out that was in no way ready to all of the top agencies, the big ones. And of course, they all rejected it because it wasn't nearly ready. And so then I hired a professional editor, and she helped me a lot, and there were a lot of improvements. But I was still too impatient, and I again started sending it out before it was really ready. So I still so believed in the story and loved the story so much that I didn't want to give up on it, but I knew it was pretty much too late to get it there. So when I got it into the perfect state, or as near perfect as it could get, I self-published it just so I could get it out there and followers who enjoy my writing. So even though I'm not making much of a profit off of it, I just get the satisfaction that people are being reached by it and they're enjoying it. And that's enough for me.
That's wonderful. I am a huge self-publishing person, so I applaud you for that. That's great.
Yeah.
And are you currently working on another book?
Well, I'm working on the sequel to Weatherbone. I should probably be working on a new story that I could actually get represented by an agency, but I'm kind of going where my heart takes me, and I still love this story so much I want to see it through to the end. So I'm going to write at least one more book along this storyline, and possibly even another one, because it's a pretty big story.
Wonderful. So you're thinking maybe 4 books in the series, or 3?
I'm thinking 3 probably.
Awesome.
So I'm hoping. My goal is to have book 2 out sometime this year.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
And do you work with any beta readers, or just your editor? Is she a developmental editor?
Well, the editor that I hired for the first book was the novelist Marcy Dermansky, and she's wonderful, and she really helped me to become a much better storyteller. But I'm not sure what I'm going to do this next time, because now that, since my goals have kind of morphed into this self-publishing just for fun thing right now, I'm sure, a big time editor is probably not going to want to work with somebody who's not trying to sell a whole bunch of books. So I'm thinking I'm going to probably get more involved in the support groups through the Guild and through other organizations where I can help review other people's work, and they can review mine, and we'll work together, to make our works better.
That's awesome. And yes, for anybody watching, the Nebraska Writers Guild does have a Facebook group for connecting authors together to trade manuscripts and beta read for each other. And so if you're looking for something like that and you're not a member of the Guild, join the Nebraska Writers Guild. It's in nebraskawriters.org, and you can join right from there. and we'll get you hooked up in the group and hopefully find you someone who can help you beta read. We have a question from one of our Facebook users. This person asks, what are the biggest differences between technical and creative writing, and what is the same? That's a great question.
Well, I think they really complement each other because I've been a technical writer for about 20 years now, and I've found that technical writing, it requires you to be very succinct and clear and to not waste any words. And really, good fiction writing is the same way. And so once I became a professional technical writer, it really enhanced my creative writing. And I think that there's a lot more similarities than you would think. The main difference, I would say, is with technical writing, you're helping somebody to accomplish a specific task. And so what I find it very satisfying to know that I'm helping somebody and remove stress from their life. Whereas with fiction writing, I'm helping somebody to escape into another world for a while, maybe stimulating them to look at different aspects of life and think about how they would deal with certain situations. So I think that fiction writing is just as useful as technical writing, just in different ways.
That's a great answer. So, Shoshana, what do you like to do when you're not writing?
Oh, I like to watch thunderstorms and I like to do art. My husband and I are both artists, and so we've got a lot of our artwork all over the house. Another thing that we love to do is go to concerts. We go to several rock concerts, usually every year.
Love it.
And when I'm alone, I usually spend that time reading or coming up with new story ideas.
Yes, wonderful. We have another question from a Facebook user. How did you find out about the Guild? How long have you been a member?
Let's see. I think this is my second year in the Guild. I found out about it through it was a con that was going on downtown a couple of years ago, and there were representatives from the guild there who were helping do workshops, and they were so friendly and so helpful and supportive. And so I got some literature from them, and they really inspired me to get involved. And I've been a member for 2-3 years now, but I don't think I've really taken advantage of it as much as I thought I would. And I've got a goal of getting more involved. I feel like I need to get to know everybody a little bit better than I have. I've been so involved in my own career that I haven't made time, and I really need to do that.
I totally get that. Definitely. What does your family think of you and your writing?
My mom has been probably the most supportive person. She pulls no punches in her criticism because sometimes I get things wrong scientifically. She's kind of like the science police. She calls me the grammar police, and together we put out pretty polished work. But if I get something wrong as far as biology or geology or something, she'll definitely whip out all of the scientific terms and explain to me how I got it wrong. So I have to make sure I get everything right so I don't offend any scientists out there.
I love it. That's great.
But yeah, the whole family has been very supportive.
Oh, wonderful. That's great. Let's see. Who are your favorite authors?
I would say my favorite author currently is the late Cage Baker. She was an amazing science fiction writer, and excuse me, she wrote the Company series, which is about 10 or 12 books. It's really long, and it has a lot of associated short stories, but it's about time travelers and corporate greed. So it's a wonderful mix. I highly recommend it. It's been a big influence on me. My other favorite authors are, of course, Stephen King. He influenced the way I develop characters and show the inside of their minds. His stories are always so warm and personal. It's even if it's horror or something, it's still the characters are the biggest thing. My other favorites would be, my other favorite author is Dan Shawn, who is a Nebraskan. He usually writes pretty dark and gloomy stories, but they're so good that, you just devour them. Or they devour you.
Gina's very excited that you're another King fan. She loves Stephen King as well. We have another question from a viewer. Tell us about the main character in your book.
Okay, the book has two protagonists. One is named Tori and one is named Marissa. They grew up together, and Tori always wanted to be a meteorologist. The reason being, she was always fascinated with storms because as a little girl, from the time she was a little girl, every time storms would come, she could predict what they were going to do. She knew how many inches of rain there would be, if there was going to be a tornado, all of that stuff. And also, when she went outside and looked up into the storm, she could see these giant creatures that looked like dragons or serpents. No one else could see them. And she thought of them as her angels. And the only other person who knew about her secrets was her best friend, Marissa. And right before they graduate from high school, Marissa disappears and is presumed dead. And so that's kind of where the story takes off. Tori is so upset about this whole thing that the loss of her best friend, she can't even get on with her own life. Drinking too much, staying in the same job, not following her dreams, while Marissa was actually kidnapped by an evil corporation in another dimension. And so I don't want to give away too much more than that.
Spoilers.
Yeah, I don't want to give away too much more than that.
Awesome. That's great. We have another question. Is your book set in Nebraska?
Yes, it is.
Awesome.
And under Nebraska.
I love it.
Yeah, I was a waitress for a few years long ago in Kearney, but the story is set in Lincoln. But a lot of my experiences as a waitress and the atmosphere of the restaurant, I've set that all in Lincoln instead.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we have another question. Do your characters ever make any decisions, or did they go any directions that surprised you?
Yeah. I kind of let them take over. And I know that's kind of a cliche, but that's really what happens when you really get into the rhythm of the story. And I've had them do some things that really shocked and surprised me. Tori has more of a drinking problem than I thought she had. And Marissa is a little bit more ruthless than I thought she was. So interesting things happen.
Isn't that fun when you're riding along and all of a sudden, whoa, where'd that come from?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
that begs the question, did you outline your book or did you just go by the seat of your pants?
I kind of do both. I usually I start with just an emotion and I write whatever, enhances that emotion. And I'll write different scenes that are not in any particular order, or I'll outline characters. Gradually, it starts to take a shape. So that around then is when I write my first outline. And I follow the outline for a while, and then I just go off into Never Never Land again. And I just write more stuff, throwing it out there. And then I come up with another outline to try and pull it all together. So I just kind of go back and forth and back and forth. By the end of it, I'm pretty strictly following an outline as it narrows down towards the end. But right now, I'm kind of all over the place, and I enjoy it that way.
Yeah, that's great. I've tried to outline before, but yeah, my characters don't want to stick to an outline. So
No, they're hard. They're kind of unruly.
Yeah, they are. So if you could tell your younger writer self something, what would you tell yourself 5 or 10 years ago?
I would tell myself to believe in yourself a lot more. Don't be so impatient. Don't think this is all there's ever going to be. I wouldn't have moved so quickly if I had known that if I had just stuck with it a little longer, I would have gotten a lot better book, and I would have met more people in the industry and, just gotten started a lot earlier.
Yes.
Instead of kind of muddling around because, I just didn't believe in myself. I didn't have that confidence. I wrote all the time, but I didn't really think that I was actually going to have a chance at publishing anything.
Yes. Yes. So that's really good advice for everybody. So what kind of music do you listen to while you write?
Well, it depends on if I'm doing the writing in my head or at my computer, because when I'm doing the writing in my head, it's usually in my car during my commute or whatever. And I tend to listen to the same songs over and over and over again while I'm writing a scene in my head, so that it becomes kind of a very highly emotional video that goes with the songs. And then when I get home, I write those scenes, but I can't have words when I'm writing. So I have to, I go on YouTube and I get these like emotional instrumental tracks that go on for hours and hours. And that just really kind of pushes me to make it even more emotional. This is where it's okay to be totally dramatic, in your writing. So I just let it all hang out. Just play the music really loud. It's wonderful.
So what was the hardest scene you've ever had to write?
I think probably to date, the hardest scene I've written was an escape scene when Marissa is getting away. I'm not going to tell you if she actually got away. I don't want to give that away. But the route she had to take was very complicated, and I had to do some research to get it right. I'm a lot better at character than I am at setting, so this just was a big challenge because it was a big setting that she had to traverse. And so I wanted to not just have her in this little capsule where you couldn't see what was going on. I wanted to really show what this whole place was like that she was going through. So that was pretty hard for me.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So I think we're all excited and waiting for you to read some of your book, Weatherbone. So if you would love to do a reading for us.
Let me take a cough drop here so I don't cough.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
So Weatherbone has a number of flashbacks that show when Tori and Marissa were children. This one is one of those. And I think all you need is Marissa has an abusive father. His name is Rusty. Rusty has a brother named Deke, who Marissa absolutely adores. So this is the chapter called The Garden, summer 1979. I'm going to be a weatherman. That right. Uncle Deke downshifted off Coddington, screeching into Pioneers Park, grinning over his shoulder at me. A second later, I was laid flat against the back seat as we zoomed up the steep hill, 4.6 V8 engine bellowing. In the passenger seat, Marissa shrieked in delight as trees streaked past and our stomachs got left behind. He was actually her uncle, Rusty's brother, but Marissa went on about him so much that in my mind, Uncle Deke was his first name. He lived in the exotic, far-off land of Kansas City, and whenever he came through town, he always snuck us out for a cruise in his beat-up red 65 Mustang. So, you gonna get up there on the TV and tell everybody when it's gonna rain? I couldn't answer due to my heart being in my throat as we raced circles around the roundabout at the top of the hill, making the bronze buffalo at its center seem to spin slowly on its pedestal. He was still grinning at me in the rear view, his dark blue eyes lit from within. I just nodded, trying not to decorate the raggedy back seat. with the hot dogs and ice cream we'd had for lunch. Coming out of the curve, we shot down the other side of the hill. He'd started this conversation by asking us what we were going to be when we grew up. I already knew and had my answer ready anytime someone asked. Marissa, on the other hand, never answered the same way twice. I'm going to be the sheriff, she said. Uncle Deke did a mock double take, staring back at her with eyes wide, making us giggle, my queasy stomach suddenly forgotten. You're not going to throw your poor old Unc in the clink, are you? No, her face was shining. Why would I do that? Well, he sat up straight behind the wheel, eyes shifting left to right, making us giggle even more. 'Cause sometimes I'm a bad boy. He flinched, peeking fearfully over at his niece. My gut had started to hurt from laughing. He lowered his voice to just above a whisper, on the wrong side of the law. Now I gotta watch out for the effing BI. Marissa was laughing so hard, tears squeezed out of the corners of her eyes. But you're not bad. I'm only gonna arrest bad guys. 'Cause being against the law doesn't always mean you're bad. Their eyes met again, midnight blue to midnight blue, and the smile they shared this time was weighted with love, not jokes. Listen, Uncle Deke sounded serious now. This world's full of fun haters, like cops and teachers and my brother. You know that, right, Em? Marissa nodded. You got to stay a step ahead of them, so they don't ever get the best of you. Don't ever forget what I'm about to tell you. He slowed the car way down, turning to look down at his niece. You make like you're doing one thing and really do something else. Understand? Marissa stared back at him, concentrating on every word. Let them think they got the best of you. Meantime, you're figuring out how to take them down. Look like you're going to stab him and then shoot him instead. Then you're golden. Marissa gazed up at her uncle in adoration, her face clearing with understanding. Does it really work? Works every time, my promise to you. He shifted into gear. Now, want to see how fast the old Stang will fly? We did. The tires wailed, and for a couple minutes, it felt as though we really were flying. Our screams of joy were cut short when a cop car topped a distant hill for just a second, and Uncle Deke slowed the Mustang as the cruiser disappeared into the trees again. By the time it reappeared in the oncoming lane, we were going normal speed. Uncle Deke waved, and the cop waved back. Golden! He held up his hand so we could both slap him 5. Weathermen are only right 32.5% of the time, he said, as if there'd been no interruption. We were cruising along the park bottoms now towards the nature center. There weren't many picnickers out braving this heat. Most of the grass had turned yellow in the drought, and a searing wind blew dust in the windows. Not Tori, said Marissa, ignoring my efforts to shush her. If I learned one thing in the first grade, it was that you don't go around telling people things that make you sound crazy. Not even if you have a friend like Marissa to beat them up if they don't believe you. We were almost to the nature center. There was a chain across the drive with a closed sign. Uncle Deke turned off down a dirt road that ended in a shadowy grove of trees and parked the car. Then he twisted around to look at me, his arm thrown over the back of the seat. That right, he said. It's all right, Marissa said to me. He's not like other people. Uncle Deke guffawed at that. I'll take that as a compliment. So, Miss Weatherman, when is it going to rain again? It doesn't work like that, I said, despite myself. But when a storm is coming, I can tell what it's going to do before it starts. Like, is it going to hail, tornadoes, stuff like that? I nodded, flushing with pride. Marissa was wriggling in her seat, grinning from ear to ear. He studied me a little longer, and I started to worry that I shouldn't have told. Then he seemed to come to a decision. Got something for you, he said seriously, both of you. But you can absolutely not tell any fun haters, especially your dad, Em. He turned back around and started fiddling with the car door. I strained to see over his shoulder. He paused, not looking up. Promise? Promise, we both said, looking at each other curiously as he resumed whatever he was doing. Suddenly, the armrest sprang up, and he reached into a hidden compartment in the door and pulled out a bottle of amber liquid. The label on the side of it bore the mysterious words, Single barrel. What's that? Marissa asked. This here is a magic drink, Uncle Deke explained. Unscrewing the cap and pouring a tiny splash into it, he handed it to me. It'll give you special powers right when you need them most. What kind of powers? I asked, my throat closing on the smell. Well, in your case, it'll probably just make the powers you already got even stronger. Drink it, Marissa said excitedly. Gotta do it fast or it won't work, he warned. I gulped it down and then fought the urge to upchuck, my eyes filling with tears. Me, Marissa was holding out her hands. He poured her a slug, then raised the bottle in a toast. To magic, he said solemnly, and took a swig. To magic, said Marissa, and tossed back her tiny shot. To magic, I echoed as she gagged and coughed, her face turning red. Hooey! Uncle Deke yelled, making us both jump. He got out of the car and started bending his knees and kicking his feet in some kind of chicken dance. Come on, he hollered. We gonna make it rain. You got the power in you, girl. Now use it. Next thing I knew, we were all leaping around on the grass, throwing our knees and elbows out, whooping and yipping like a pack of coyotes. After a time, Marissa and I collapsed, out of breath, and Uncle Deke leaned, panting against the car. Finally, Marissa sat up. Do you think it'll work? Oh yeah, you're golden. But he seemed to have lost interest in the subject. Uncle Deke dropped me off on the way to Marissa's. Jake, our collie shepherd, trotted out of the shade, his long tail waving. Together we went around to the back of the house. My father stood in the garden, the dusty hose and sprinkler hanging in his hand, staring at the zucchini vines. The drought had gone on for so long, the city had begun to impose watering restrictions. He started when my hand found his. Hi, Pookie, he said, dropping the sprinkler among the drooping plants. Did you have fun over at Marissa's? Uh-huh, we had ice cream and stuff. Our adventure with Uncle Deke felt like some wild, dark secret that might somehow lose its magic if spoken of aloud. Dad said nothing more. His eyes had that faraway look, the one that meant he was seeing memories instead of the garden. In that moment, I would have said anything to make him happy again. Dad, it's gonna rain. My father looked around at the dusty vines, the poor stunted squash. Sweetheart, we haven't had rain in almost 2 months. It'd be a miracle if we got any at all, let alone enough to save our garden. Long after Dad had retreated to his den where he kept his notebooks and record albums, Jake and I lingered in the scant shade of the corn. It was getting to be late afternoon, and even though I'd been straining my eyes for the last hour, I couldn't see a single cloud in any direction. The crunch of dry grass startled us. Then Jake jumped up with a woof and ran to welcome Ernie as Marissa let her bike fall on the lawn. Her eyes were ocean dark, her mouth a hard line. What happened? I asked. The two dogs gallumped around the yard together for a bit, but soon retired to the shade. Uncle Deke and Rusty got in a fight. She aimed a vicious kick at a dirt clod, exploding it. He's not supposed to come in our house anymore. She sat next to me in the dust, and Jake and Ernie sat on my other side. After a while, I said, do you think he meant it about the rain? He doesn't lie, not to me. Maybe we didn't do enough, though. Maybe we need to do more. I could tell she was listening. Like what? I don't know. I reached out and took hold of her hand. Shut your eyes. The sun baked down on us and sweat stuck my tank top against my back. Jake's tail thumped among the dry corn stalks, and then, as if he understood this better than us, he settled one heavy paw on my shoulder. Now what do we do? Marissa asked, her grimy hands sweating in mine. Push, I replied, not really knowing what I meant. So we pushed. I thought about cool air and thirsty plants and water racing cold down dusty garden rows. And a feeling crept over me, as thrilling as it was scary, a falling up of vast, cold darkness and impossible height. To cover my fear, I snapped, keep him shut, Marissa. I am, she said indignantly. When it happened, we all felt it. Ernie let out a little whine, and Marissa and I opened our eyes. There was nothing new to see, and the day was still blistering. But the air had changed. It didn't stifle like a minute ago. I swallowed and my ears popped. Then the light began to change. The corn, the shed, the blades of grass. Everything stood out, taking on a stark orangish cast. We got up and came out of the corn to the edge of the garden. There in the west, a blood-colored sun was just disappearing behind towering black pillars of cloud. A sudden cool breeze sprang through the currant bushes, carrying with it hints of damp soil, rain, and the thunder smell, ozone. And then, deep within the swelling storm, a giant shadow coiled, lengthened, slowly ringed the base of the clouds, then circled upward, inward, vanishing into the flickering depths.
Shoshana, that was fantastic. I love the depth of your descriptions. I just felt like I was right there with that dry soil and that storm coming. And I just loved that. You gave me chills. Such a good job.
Thank you.
We have one more question from a Facebook user. Is your aim just to entertain, or do you try to get us to think about moral or political issues with your fiction works?
Whenever I start writing something, it's just to have fun and express my feelings. And a message usually comes out of it after a couple of drafts. I would say with Weatherbone, there's a couple of messages, mostly having to do with friendship, and with having to do with finding out that you may be capable of things you didn't think you were when pushed into extreme situations. And I'm sure there's lots of others, depending on the reader, that you would be able to extrude from there.
Wonderful. So fun. This has been so awesome having you on our show for the first show of our Nebraska Writers Guild author chat. And I'm excited that you were able to come on last minute. So thank you so much for doing that for us.
Well, I hope I did okay. I was really excited to be on.
Yes, you did fantastic. It was great. We have lots of comments from people saying you like your writing style, really nice. People really are liking it. So thank you so much for coming on. Next week, we will have Mary Schwanner. And Mary is the author of Courage in a White Coat. It's a book about a Colorado woman doctor who survived 3 years in a World War II concentration camp in Manila. So that sounds fascinating, right? Can't wait for next week. So we will say goodbye. If anybody would like to come on this show, if you're an author and you would like to come on this show, message me or go to the Nebraska Writers Guild website and click the contact us button. And if you send a message through there, I will get it and say, hey, I'm a member of the Guild and I would love to be an author on your show, and I will get you hooked up. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.